Take each game on its merits there.
Okay, you're very welcome to Each Game on Its Merits, where we go through every senior soccer international ever played by an FAI side. And now, Jerry Farrell, I've just introduced you there. My name's Eibhilin O'Reardon. We're going to talk about the Ireland game against the Dutch in a World Cup qualifier in 1934. In our previous episode, we had the Ireland-Belgium 4-4 draw, which has not really set us up extremely well for qualification. But anyway, we didn't lose. But the feeling now is we probably have to go to Amsterdam and win in order to qualify for the 1934 World Cup, which will be held that summer. And this doesn't happen. Yeah, so there is a feeling that a win would be great, that guarantees us qualification, but it's 2 out of 3 qualify. There's a view that because literally a month before this game, the Belgians have been hockeyed by the Dutch in a friendly 9-3. That basically, as long as we don't lose by a big margin, and a draw here could be enough because there's an expectation that the Dutch will beat the Belgians. So if we have 2 draws and the Belgians are beaten and only have 1 draw, then we'll finish second and we're off to the World Cup. Off to the World Cup, which is being held in Italy. Fascist Italy. Yeah, this is and a lot of the, if you go over to a Serie A game, a lot of the lovely stadiums you might see are probably being built around this time. I was in Bologna a couple of years ago, and the Stadio delle Renate, I think it's called, it was originally one of those neoclassical fascist era designs and things like that. So a lot of those stadiums are still around there now. If only we had hosted the World Cup ourselves, we might have a whole lot of very impressive stadiums. Richmond Park. This Celtic revivalist style, 40,000 bowl. It would have been stadium. Incredible. Yes. You know what I mean? But we don't. We still have chipper vans behind the goals in the various League of Ireland grounds. Anyway, we'll move on from that. Our failure to host that. Speaking of stadiums and major events, so the Dutch have hosted the Olympics way back in 1924. We know this because 1928. This is the Olympic Stadium. They've expanded the capacity because obviously the Dutch, I think, have realised that the World Cup is a bit of a thing, and also they're still a bit sore from losing 2-0 against us a couple of years ago. You would be, wouldn't you? You would be. Yeah, so they're out for revenge. This is a record attendance. 38,000 people. So 33,000 is the capacity of the stadium. They put in a 5,000 temporary stand to meet demand. So very much like Dalymount Park. And that today. Yeah, and that has happened historically in Dalymount Park many times for internationals. For anybody who's been in the mono stand. The mono stand, yes. Yeah. So the Dutch, and we mentioned in the previous episode, there's a guarantee of a £650 fee plus our expenses are covered, which makes the FAI a tidy little profit. But if we had asked for a portion of the gate receipts, we would have been rolling in it, because this match generates a revenue of over 13 grand, which back then it's massive money. So even if we had a 10 or 15% stake, we would have been rolling in it. But we've settled for 650 without possibly realising the demand for tickets. Right. To put it in context as well, there's been a lot of pre-promotion of this. So bringing it back to Bows, because I always do. Literally the weeks prior to this, around the Easter break, Bows are playing a tournament in Amsterdam. So it's a number of teams. Cercle Bruges from Belgium are playing. Go Ahead from Deventer, Go Ahead Eagles as they're known now, and a team called Ajax, you might have heard of, are playing in this tournament. Now Bows lose on the 1st of April. They made look April Fools to Go Ahead in Amsterdam. They then beat Cercle Bruges, but because of the nature of the tournament, they don't actually get to play Ajax, and they play an extra friendly against a team in The Hague called basically the precursor to ADO Den Haag. So Bows are actually over there at the time, and the Bows players who are selecting the squad actually stay in the Netherlands. They don't bother coming back to Dublin to only go back. So Billy Jordan and Fred Horlicher, who we'll mention later, are actually been in the Netherlands for over a week at this stage. But they and one replaces the other during this game. So we'll talk about the first substitution. So a reminder for anyone who listened back to the previous episode, but there's an agreement. Do not come to this podcast having not done your homework. Exactly. Right. So there's kind of a unique set of agreements made in this qualifying group between the 3 associations. And one of the agreements is that it's all about money. If someone is injured before half time, they can replace up to 2 outfield players and a goalkeeper. Because I think goalkeepers got a bit of a hard time in this period. They used to be, they used to have to be a bit mad because it was very physical. Well,
we'll come on to the rough treatment of goalkeepers in this match, actually.
Yeah, because Paddy Moore scores a goal by basically bundling a guy over the line.
Yes, and like we talked about it before with
Tom
Farquharson in the Spain game, where he gives away a penalty because a guy tries to barge him into the goal, and he basically offers him his shoulder to the fella's jaw, and
okay.
Yeah,
they were rough times. Will I go to the? I'll go to the team anyway.
Go to the team. Yes.
Okay, right. So Jim Foley, after his catastrophic 4-0 concession of 4 goals against Belgium, is it plays this game.
Yes,
and then goes on to concede 5. Paddy Gaskins is back. Paddy Bourne from Drumcondra. Joe O'Reilly, Aberdeen. Harry Shatton. Or Catton, I keep calling him Shatton.
I'm saying it's a hard CH.
Yeah, Shatton. Okay, from Cork, Joe Kendrick. From Dolphin, Billy Kennedy, James's Gate, Johnny Squires, what a great name, as he makes his debut. Paddy Moore, Aberdeen. Billy Jordan, as we've mentioned there, Bowes. Paddy Meehan from Drumcondra, his first cap as well. And Horker does come on for Jordan after 40 minutes. Now, Ireland were the better team in the first half, but suffered a blow before the break when Jordan went off with an ankle injury. An ankle injury was probably, his ankle was totally smashed or something.
You could barely hobble
around the place, right? It's not a case of running that off, lad.
Well, Jordan apparently felt he was safe enough to carry on, but I think they probably were once bitten, twice shy with the injury to Tim O'Keefe.
Right, okay, who had missed a few chances there for right. We'll replace him, and we'll have a fit 11. Okay, his replacement Horker was only just on the field when Holland scored. Across from Wells was knocked into net by Schmidt. 2 minutes later, Moore set up an easy chance for Squires to level the score. Okay, so we're 1-1. Okay, we're happy enough. Early in the second half, Ireland went ahead. Dutch goalkeeper Van Mel was slow in clearing the ball, and Moore ran in to shoulder him and the ball into the net. Them were the days.
Yeah, and that goal is credited to Paddy Moore.
Such challenges were legal at the time when the goal stood. Absolutely. Okay, so we're 2-1 up. We're heading to the World Cup. All right, you'd imagine. All right,
and you're going. They're confident going. Like even if we concede a goal, sure.
This is. Yeah, we're off. We're lads. Just. I mean, this.
We're off to Italy.
This smells like it smells like the Danish game. Really, remember we were 1-0 up against Denmark. Shane Duffy, and everything was fine, and then the world fell apart. So we're 2-1 up. Anyway, Moore had a chance to put the Irish further ahead, but his lob shot just over. Oh man. So it could have been 3-1.
Yeah.
65 minutes of break.
We know Paddy Moore likes a little lob, a little chip.
He does like a little lob. He likes our lobs, says our Paddy. On 65 minutes, a break from the halfway line set up Bacchus to equalise with a shot which just went in off the post. 2-2, but not the end of the world.
No.
We can still go ahead.
A draw can be good enough.
Would, I think, possibly if there's a win in the other game. All right. In the final 10 minutes, I think this is where...
Now, remember, goal difference is important. Goal difference exists in this qualifying group. And this is what does it.
I mean, I think this Dutch scored 3 more goals to give them a flattering victory.
Yeah.
There's a header... Vente adds another, and Schmidt scored the 5th with a glorious drive. It feels like everything fell apart.
3 goals in 7 minutes.
In the last 3 goals in 7 minutes. So, lads, I'm devastated because it looks like we are on the way to the World Cup. We're 2-1 up. Is that the kind of the Troy Parrott against the Scots there when we were remember and he got through on goal and he didn't, or the time when I'm just thinking of all these opportunities we had to score when remember in the Euro 2016 when didn't square it to Darren Murphy and I think it was James McLean, was it? I could be wrong, sorry. But anyway, so disaster, and we lose 5-2. That's us gone.
Yeah, and well,
I mean, goal difference, 9 goals we've conceded in 2 games.
One of the FAI officials says that it was one of the best Irish teams to ever represent the Free State, but also one of the unluckiest. Now, we could also say that
I don't know. We lose 5-2.
We've been undone again by perfidious Albion. We'll always say this, but because of the team we have there, Jim Foley, as I say, has conceded 9 goals in 2 matches. Tom Farquharson is called up for this game. So we've mentioned the previous
FA Cup winner,
superstar, lost out on a league title by goal .024 of goal average in the 1920s. Penalty king. Now, Cardiff have suffered, in the previous couple of seasons. They're currently in the 3rd Division South.
I'm so annoyed by us losing this game.
Yeah, So
sorry, but I am.
But we
didn't realise, because I saw the scoreline. I thought 5-2. We were fairly handily, swatted aside.
Well, we were winning. Yeah,
we were not only winning, but we could have Paddy.
Yeah, I know. But we could have had a more experienced goalkeeper in Farquharson. We tried to call him up. Cardiff initially say okay, but they refer to the Football League, and the Football League say we don't want players being released to the FAI for these World Cup things.
After his diplomatic incident in 1931, he's
And Farquharson is vocal about this. So we said Farquharson doesn't play again, but they do try to call him up. And what he says is that because he's joined Cardiff, he's had probably the best 5 or 6 years of their existence, where they come second in the league, they get to 2 cup finals, they win 1.
Yeah.
But he's also with them as that team ages, as they sell a lot of players, they're in financial difficulty. They try to sell him to Hull. He doesn't go to Hull and back. But he's stuck with them through thick and thin. They're actually at the bottom of the 3rd Division South. So what they need to do to avoid disappearing into non-league is they have to seek re-election from the Football League. So he basically says they chickened out because they had initially given me permission. The FAI have even written to the FA of Wales as well. And they're saying they didn't want to piss off the Football League by releasing a player when they had to rely on the Football League to get re-elected.
Also, you're kind of sending them out into the unknown. You're sending them to Amsterdam. They're playing a game about a tournament that the English aren't actually that interested in. And, given the nature of football at the time, this guy's an important player and he could get injured. And look, bundled into the back of the net. And
exactly.
Et cetera.
And we're missing a couple other players who played in the previous game. David Babby Byrne and Jimmy Kelly, because they're playing in the Irish League with Coleraine and Derry City respectively.
With no Alex Stevenson, who was a serious player.
So Derry City and Coleraine don't release those players. Willie Fallon, who's playing for Notts County, isn't released. Paddy Meehan, who you see there. So Paddy Meehan's playing left wing. This is his only cap. He's a drums player. This is his first full season at Drumcondra. So
really,
So
he's like he's
very
much a novice.
Yeah, but obviously
thrown into this deep end.
Willie Fallon,
the cauldron in Amsterdam.
Yeah, Willie Fallon isn't released. Tim O'Keefe is banned for his indiscretions in the previous game.
Because if you were listening to the previous episode, he allegedly stole the wallet of the Belgian goalkeeper, so he's banned.
So Paddy Meehan is probably your third or fourth choice left winger, because Jimmy Kelly there. You're playing Billy Jordan, who's
shambolic. Really
an outside left at inside left.
Paddy Moore's probably saying to himself, "What a bunch of."
So we're being hamstrung here by nowadays you could just say, right,
Paddy Moore's probably the Roy Keane of his day guy.
Well, Paddy Moore by all accounts is far more happy-go-lucky than Roy, I think.
Okay,
but it's still a very unlucky side, and very disappointing that this happens. But this is going back to.
I'm really annoyed.
So we were.
It's unfair. I'm actually more annoyed about this.
I know. Yeah, we're missing out 3 or 4 players.
Oh God.
And I might just mention a few of the guys who do score against us, though, because the guys who get the goals for the Dutch are interesting. And I think there's a new generation of good young Dutch players coming through who are better than what we faced before when we've beaten the Dutch. So we might just mention Kik Schmidt, great name, Johannes Schmidt, to give him his full name. There was basically the equivalent of Roy the Rovers in Dutch kind of football cartoons is a player called Kik Wilstra, which is a compound of Kik Schmidt, Abe Lenstra and Fas Wilkes. So his name is a compound of the 3 great Dutch players of the era.
Right.
Kik Schmidt is the first one to come through. Abe Lenstra, who plays for Heerenveen, comes through next, and then Fas Wilkes, who becomes probably the first international superstar for the Dutch, because Fas Wilkes goes to play for Inter Milan and becomes a superstar in Serie A. So Kik Schmidt is considered one of the great Dutch players of all time, and for some people he's the greatest Dutch player up until the appearance of Johan Cruyff. Lean Vinte, who's playing for a team called Neptunus, who now aren't really a football team anymore. They are more famous now as a baseball club. Lean Vinte is the man who joins Feyenoord soon after this, and he scores the first goal in Feyenoord's famous De Kuip Stadium. So he's the first goal scorer in De Kuip. He opens a cafe later on, and it's bombed by the Luftwaffe during the air raids in Rotterdam in 1940. So he has to reopen his cafe. And another guy, the guy who scores 2 goals, Beb Bakhuis, who, this guy, and look, hopefully we'll have another Dutch football expert on shortly to talk about some of these players, but this guy deserves a podcast in his own right. His father is an administrator in a sugar factory in what's now modern day in Indonesia, what back then was the Dutch East Indies. He comes back, he plays in the Netherlands. Because it's supposed to be technically still amateur at the time, there's all sorts of under-the-counter payments. He gets given a cigar shop. He goes to play in France even though he doesn't really want to. He does all these kind of mad things.
It's like GA stuff.
Oh god, yeah.
Where a guy becomes a teacher in a local school to switch county.
He gets banned 2 or 3 times. He later, because he's in France,
why is he banned for what? Just for professionalism.
Yes, because basically he's told that, well, you're not given this cigar shop to run because you're a famous cigar shop owner. This is effectively a payment. We're onto you.
Right.
And he then later gets forced to work in kind of Leipzig during the Second World War. He's one of the forced labour conscripts from Netherlands and northern France. But he actually ends up playing football for a couple of the clubs in Leipzig as well. So he's a very
interesting guy.
Interesting and fascinating career. He goes back and forth. He's actually playing football in Indonesia for a while as well. So a fascinating player, controversial guy in Dutch football history.
And did us in.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, neither of these two teams, by the way, who both qualified as a result of this game, they didn't do particularly well in the World Cup. And just going through they both got knocked out in the first round.
To Germany and to Switzerland, respectively.
Yeah, Germany hammered Belgium 5-2, and Switzerland beat the Netherlands 3-2. So that was it. That was the end of their involvement. So maybe if we'd gotten through, we would.
And there's no group stages. It's a straight knockout cup tournament.
So I imagine we wouldn't necessarily have performed much better.
Well, here's the question, and we always say this, Aon. If you have a full Irish eligible team, if you have Tom Ferguson, if you have Willie Fallon, if you have Jimmy Dunn, if you have all these players,
Alex Stevenson, etc.
Yeah,
where's Jimmy Dunn?
Yeah, well, Jimmy Dunn is not released. Remember, the only time
he's a goal scoring. He's a goal scoring phenomenon.
The only time Paddy Moore and Jimmy Dunn play together is for the IFA Select, which is Paddy Moore gets one cap for the IFA. This
podcast is breaking my heart. Like, I mean, I have 40 years of pain with the Irish football team, and now I've got 100 years of it.
Yes.
I mean, they. So like Paddy Moore and Jimmy Dunn up front would have been some combination.
But were
they similar players? Maybe it wouldn't.
I don't think so. I think that would have worked fine, because I think Paddy Moore, and we see it in later games, Paddy Moore moves back to an inside right role, and Dunn is the more prominent centre forward because he's bigger and stronger.
Yeah.
And Moore is a skillful technical player. So I think they could have easily played together and played together well.
Oh.
I know, and right. I know it's annoying getting frustrated by something that happened 90 years ago, but we were quite close to the World Cup.
Maybe, we were.
Yeah.
We were. Okay. So, right. So look, we're on the eve of the Second World War here. You know, I mean, things get pretty hairy in the coming years. Games are few and far between, really, for this team.
What does happen? We were talking about Jack Ryder writing kind of a begging letter to FIFA saying, "Can you help us get more fixtures?" Now, in fairness, FIFA do come through, so we actually play a lot more friendlies in the coming years, because we have games coming up against the likes of Hungary, Switzerland, so more continental sides, and in 1936 we go all out and we actually do a continental tour, which is
really
so we play 3 matches away from Dublin, which is interesting.
Right, so December 34. We have Hungary. May 35 we have Switzerland. Hungary's at home, Switzerland's away. Then we have in May 35 Germany away, Holland at home in December 35. So actually I'm wrong. There's about 2 games a year now.
And then we have obviously qualifying for the next World Cup coming up, all before the outbreak of war.
Yeah. Okay.
Now we should say that we will be rounding off to, because our disappointment is so great.
Yeah,
that
we have to take a break.
We'll be taking a short break.
We're saying this is kind of the end of Series 1.
Yeah, so we're finishing up with Ireland failing to qualify for World Cup.
We've 10 years of games done, from 1924 to 1934, which is like the games of the Olympics of 1924 to the World Cup games of 34. That is a good place to finish our first series, and then we'll move on to the next series of games.
We'll be back later in the summer to talk about some of these controversial friendlies, controversial
individuals, and just the growth of this team and the advancement of Irish football in a very difficult time. A very, very difficult time. Okay, Jerry, we've just I don't know. Anything else you want to say about this game?
it's another case of what might have been. That I suppose what I've learned from just doing the research here is that continental sides were playing a lot more matches, and that it's something that we missed out on, probably not through any fault of our own, because of the difficulty getting players released and the difficulty arranging fixtures. That does improve in the coming years, and I think that makes a big difference.
And then there is this ongoing tension between those who feel that they are the bastions of the game, which is the English FA and other FAs of in these islands, and the continental sides and the South American sides, and that tension between them. So the English FA are still trying to hold on to the sense that it's their game, it's an English game, and they should be the predominant football association. They still call themselves the Football Association. And just these shifts and moves in other countries, setting up their own tournament. That there's a resistance from the English FA really to buy into the international game, and beyond the structures that they have set up with the home internationals, etc.
Yeah, and that they're not going to participate in a World Cup for another. Well, we're talking about 1934. It's 16 years before they participate in a World Cup. They're kind of looking down on this sort of stuff, and they're very deliberate in saying we don't want to help the FAI. We don't think you should release players. And it's frustrating that and as we're saying, the head of the football league at the time is an Irishman.
Right, okay, with that
on that bombshell,
we will adjourn for a few weeks, and we look forward to getting back and talking about the next series of game in our podcast, Each Game on Its Merits.
So we are delighted to welcome back to the pod Jurryt van der Vooren. So people remember you from our Olympic Games chat about the game against the Netherlands in 1934. And we're delighted we just had a discussion on that podcast about the Olympic Games and those matches being recognised as full internationals. And we're delighted to say that we've achieved that. And that the players, this will go out just before the game. The players' families are being recognised, and the Ireland match against Hungary on June 4th, which is fantastic. And it's been a real privilege for both myself and Aon to meet so many of the family members, descendants of those players from 1934, and have them properly re-recognised as full international caps. So Ireland's first international game now is recognised against Bulgaria in 1924, and its second, obviously, against the Netherlands. And that's the subject of our chat today, is the 1934 World Cup, where we once again meet the Netherlands, our third international meeting. Ireland had lost in the Olympics after extra time, won in a friendly match in 1932, and now we're facing the Netherlands in the qualifying group along with Belgium. Top two qualify. Ireland have got a 4-4 draw in a fascinating game against Belgium in Dalymount Park. Now we're coming to Amsterdam, and it starts very well for Ireland, but doesn't finish very well. What can you tell us about that game and maybe some of the personalities involved in Dutch football and that team at the time?
Well, the game was played in Amsterdam in the Olympic Stadium, which then was only 6 years old. It was built for the 1928 Olympics. Uruguay was Olympic champion in that stadium after 2 finals against Argentina. And so it was only 6 years old, not even 6 years old, because it was in April 1934. And of course, the Olympics, they were held in summer 1928. And the stadium wasn't that big as it is later, because there was at that time maybe some 30,000 people could gather. And for the match against Ireland, in Dutch, Ierse Vrijstaat, it was called, there were 5,000 more seats just for that match. And that was at that moment the busiest match ever of the Dutch team in a home manner.
And why was that? Was there a lot of interest in the World Cup? Was it people who maybe saw the Irish team play 2 years ago, or what was happening that made this such a big game?
Well, football was becoming increasingly popular in the Netherlands in the 30s. And one of the reasons was broadcasting of radio stations, live matches. So a lot of people who never had seen or heard about football, living in areas in the Netherlands which were very far away from everything, small villages, they had a radio, and then they could listen to live broadcasting of Dutch football matches, club matches, also national matches. And that's why a lot of people wanted to have a ticket to go to the Olympic Stadium. At that moment, the only big stadium in the Netherlands. Feyenoord is only 1937. So it's the biggest stadium in the Netherlands. Everyone wanted to go to Amsterdam to see a match of the national football team because they heard it on the radio before. And also the Netherlands, maybe there was their first chance to go to the World Cup. It was only the second one, 1930, the first one. It was too far away for the Netherlands to go to South America. And in 1934, it was a little bit closer. It was in Italy. And then it was the first time the Netherlands were able to qualify. And the last and most important match of all was against Ireland, because if they would win, they would have been qualified for the first time ever for a World Cup. So a lot of reasons to watch. And still, maybe it's typical Dutch. We always think the Dutch team will win anyway, so why should we play the match? Maybe it's better for the other team to stay home and then recognize, okay, you won, we don't have to play. That's the attitude we have if the Dutch are playing. It was also in 1934, so everyone was expecting the Dutch to win because we had a great team with names like Bep Bakhuis. He is one of the few players of the pre-war time who could play an international level. One of the few. He also scored in the match. Kik Smit from Haarlem. He was one of the most famous players. And Leen Vente coming from Rotterdam. They were very well-known players in the Netherlands, and everybody wanted to see them. And that's the reason why it was very, very crowded inside Amsterdam at the Olympic Stadium when Ireland was coming. And it was a new record for the amount of people watching a home match of the Netherlands team. That's something Ireland was responsible for. It took many people to the stadium, and even much more, I don't know the amounts, listening to the radio live.
And from research on this, and I know, funnily enough, my club team, Bohemians, were actually playing in the Netherlands the week beforehand in a tournament involving Ajax, Go Ahead, and ADO Den Haag, or I don't know if they're called ADO Den Haag, but a team from The Hague.
Yes.
And also a Belgian team, Cercle Bruges. And two of the Bohemian players who were in the Irish squad stayed in Netherlands for the game. But I know as well from a colleague of mine, Michael Keelty, looking through Dutch newspaper archives, there was an awful lot of promotion and a lot of hype around the game, and there were profiles of the Irish players, especially Paddy Moore, who'd scored the 4 goals against the Netherlands or against Belgium. So there seems to be a lot of promotional sort of stuff, hyping up the game, bigging up the game as a major spectacle.
Yeah, national radio stadiums. And I have a Dutch magazine from, I can see if I can find 1934. You see, this is a Dutch magazine.
Oh, it's bound. Okay.
1934. Sport in Beeld. Revue der Sporten. And I'm very close now because this is from the end of March, 2nd of April. So the next will be about Ireland here. This is, for example, what they write about Ireland. There are some cartoons.
Excellent.
And the cartoon is from also from Ireland. So you can see the week before it was 2 pages in the biggest sports magazine we had in the Netherlands. And then the week later, after the match, I will have a look, and then we can continue the conversation. Well, here you can see, this is a big article about the winning, and in Dutch, nu wij straks naar Italië trekken, when we go to Italy later, because that's the country where they were playing the World Cup. So it was a big event in the Netherlands to play against Ireland for a qualification.
And you had mentioned just before we started recording, there was a bit of controversy because in Ireland and in British football, it wouldn't be unusual for barging of the keeper, like strikers to shoulder or push the keeper while they're attacking, push the keeper and ball into the goal. Paddy Moore does this, Ireland taking the lead, but it probably would it have been a common practice in the Netherlands, or would that have been?
No.
Yeah.
Now, in Dutch, it was called het doordruk-incident, which you can translate a little bit like the push incident. Doordrukken is push. It's an old Dutch word. We don't use it anymore, but it's like the push incident. And it happened during the beginning of the second half. And in the first half, it seemed like the Netherlands, they had a better team. And then it was Moore who attacked the Dutch keeper, Adrie van Malen, Feyenoord, Rotterdam, who already had the ball in his hands. And then Moore, he was much smaller than Adrie van Malen.
Yeah, 5'6", 5'5".
Yeah, which means the head of Moore is the stomach of Adrie van Malen. So he basically attacked the stomach of the Dutch keeper. And then he was pushed inside his own goal with the ball in his hands. And since the beginning of the century, it's forbidden in international rules to attack a keeper at the moment when he has the ball in his hands. Then you may not attack anymore. But in 1934, it was Moore who pushed Adrie van Malen in his own goal and then scored the second Irish goal. And in Dutch newspapers, they said that's the difference between Dutch football and Irish football, because Dutch football, it's not allowed to be a professional, to earn money. And in United Kingdom, in Ireland, there was professional football. So they had a different attitude if they started a match. They were paid to win, the players in Ireland. And the thought in the Netherlands was they are playing because they like to play. The old-fashioned idea of football. Yeah. But most of the Dutch football players only wanted to win. But they didn't earn money with it. So they had more limits, I guess, because they could not earn more money if they would win the match. And some Dutch newspapers, they explained that's the reason why Moore attacked the Dutch keeper, because he was the Irish professional attacking the Dutch amateur, and won at that moment. And then the match was not over. At that moment, Moore was the better. But there was a discussion inside the stadium when it happened. A lot of people, they were making noise. They didn't agree. The Swedish ref, he decided it was a goal. And also in Dutch magazines there were discussions. Some said it's okay, it was a goal because it's allowed to do, and other magazines and other journalists, they wrote no, that's completely unfair. But it wasn't at the end a big issue in the Netherlands, because the Netherlands, they won anyway. But I think if it would have been at the end of the match and then Ireland would have won the match and was qualified to go to the World Cup, then I think we would have a different discussion in Dutch media. But we don't know because it didn't happen.
And obviously, the Netherlands make a great comeback. And you mentioned a couple of the goal scorers there. Beb Backhuis.
Yes, a different one. Backhuis, yes.
Backhuis and Kik Schmidt.
Yes.
Two very interesting characters. We talked a little bit about them, myself and Aon, earlier in the podcast, but maybe you could give us a little bit of perspective on them, because they're fascinating characters to me. They're obviously superstars of their era.
Especially Beb Backhuis. He came from the east of the Netherlands, the city of Zwolle, which is not so far away from Germany, and where I come from originally before I went to Amsterdam. And he has been living in, which is now Indonesia, then it was the Dutch East Indies, in the 20s and 30s. So he left Dutch football, was playing matches in Indonesia, but returned in the 30s and was playing also in The Hague and different places. And he was asked to come to VVV in Venlo, the city in the south of the Netherlands. The club still exists, second level. And they didn't pay him to be playing for them, because it was not allowed, as I already told you. You were not allowed to be a professional in Dutch football. But he was officially paid to open his own store to sell cigarettes and cigars. And the football association, the Dutch Football Association, KNVB, they found out, they decided, no, he is not paid because he's working in a shop, but he is paid, he is playing for the team. And then in 1938, he had to leave the Netherlands because he was not allowed to play on Dutch fields anymore. And he went to France to Metz. And he was one of the first professional football players coming from the Netherlands. But he was forced to. He didn't want to leave the Netherlands, but he was not allowed to play in Dutch leagues anymore. And the other one, Kik Smit, he was from the city of Haarlem, in between the North Sea and Amsterdam. And he also was one of the most famous players. And in 1946, the first year after the Second World War, playing for Haarlem, he was the main player of the team who won the national title. It's the only one Haarlem ever won. And it's because of Kik Smit. So it's sometimes you have only one player who is so important, he can make his team champion. And Kik Smit did in Haarlem. And maybe the most people in Haarlem, they don't know it anymore. But 75 years ago, he was one of the main football players from the Netherlands. And just like Bakhuis, one of the very, very few who could have been acting on an international level, but they never did because they were not allowed to be professional. And it was completely different at the time. So only Bakhuis left, and Smit, he stayed in the Netherlands. And they are famous inside the Netherlands, but not outside.
And obviously, then a little bit later, you have people like Fast Wilkes, who does something similar, goes to play in Italy as a professional and so on.
Yes. And in between Kik Smit and Bakhuis, in the 30s and in the 40s, Fast Wilkes was there. Was Abel Lenstra, who is really, really very famous in the Netherlands, from Heerenveen, at the north of the Netherlands. And he's just like Kik Smit. Heerenveen never was a champion of the Netherlands, but they were even more famous than just being champion. He was playing one of the most famous football matches ever in the Netherlands. It was in 1950, Heerenveen against Ajax. I guess you heard the name of Ajax before. And it was in Heerenveen, and only half an hour before the end of the match, it was 1-5 leading Ajax. And at the end, they lost 6-5 because Abel Lenstra was pissed off because the Ajax players called him a farmer. They say, oh, you're just a farmer from the north of the Netherlands, you little farmer. And then he really was pissed off. And in the last 20, 30 minutes, Heerenveen won. And even there has been a play of it and stories. It's one of the most famous matches. And Kik Smit, Beb Bakhuis, Abel Lenstra, it's a little bit this area, the 30s, the 40s of Dutch football, when it's on international scale, it's completely nothing. It's Dutch football only exists internationally since the end of the 60s. So they are famous inside the Netherlands, but not outside.
And just one other last question about Bakhuis. Is it correct that he ended up being transported to Germany for forced labor and things like that during the war? I had read somewhere that he ended up playing in Leipzig or something like that.
No, that's Bram Appel.
Ah, okay.
Bram Appel from The Hague. He was also a player of the national team, ADO. The Hague, and he was one of the players who was forced to go to Berlin or to other cities for labor. And but because they were very good football players, they were allowed to play football matches in German teams. So they were not working in factories which were bombed twice a day, and they were earning a lot of money, and everybody was applauding when they were playing. So they had a good time in Germany, although they didn't like it over there. But they had a better position than the other Dutch people. But there were a lot of other Dutch men who also were in Berlin, and they always went to matches to see Bram Appel or other Dutch players. But Bakhuis, he was not one of them.
Oh, okay. And I suppose Ireland, unfortunately, for us anyway, they lose 5-2, and of the three teams, Belgium and Netherlands go to the World Cup. Neither side makes it past the first round. Maybe just we'll finish up by talking about Netherlands' experience at the Italian World Cup in 34. Drawn against Switzerland, and it looks like a tight game, and Netherlands go out 3-2. And what was the experience like? What was the expectation like in Netherlands about the first?
There was a song in the Netherlands before the World Cup started, and it was "We gaan naar Rome, we gaan naar Rome," which means we are going to Rome, which was the city where they would play the World Cup final. So the Netherlands had never been on an international tournament before. It was only the second one, of course. And everybody thought, well, no problem, we are reaching the final, and then all the Dutch people, we will go to Rome and we will enter and we will beat everyone in the world and we will be the best. And after just one football match, it was a knockout system from the beginning. The Netherlands, they lost and they had to go home. It was only one match. So everybody expected before the World Cup started, well, we will be the world champions because we have very good football players. And it was only one match, and then it was over. Just like 1938, exactly the same. It was for a World Cup in France, and then it was also against Czechoslovakia after one match. Also, it was over for the Dutch team. So before 1974, the famous World Cup of the Netherlands, it was the third time they were qualified, and the 2 times before were only 2 matches together. 1934 and 1938. So there was completely no experience in Dutch football in 1974, how it was to be on the World Cup. And in 1934, it was only one match, and there were a lot of people also going to Milan. It was the city where they had to play. There were even Dutch people who went on bike to go to the north of Italy, crossing the mountains on bike. And
that's
then
interesting. There was a big traveling fan base.
What do you say?
I said very interesting that there was even then, 90 years ago, a big traveling fan base.
Yes.
The Orange Army.
It was not, of course, like it is now. But most people, they traveled by train. It was the most simple way to have European traveling. And but there were also people who went on bike expecting to see a lot of Dutch football matches before going to Rome, but it was only one match and then it was over, and they had to I don't know if they really also went back on bike to the Netherlands. Maybe they did it by train, but at least they went from the Netherlands on bike, and I guess it was 1 week or something like that to travel. And there was a lot of attention in Dutch media. It was in magazines, it was on the newspapers, on radio. There was no television, and also in cinema, where there was also a news. And so it was a very big disappointment. What everybody was disappointed what happened, and there have been a lot of stories after what happened really in the Dutch team, and there have been a lot of theories where things were gone wrong, because the keeper, the Dutch keeper, who was pushed by Paddy Moore. He was not allowed to be in the national team, go to Italy. So there was another keeper. Moore not only pushed him inside the goal, but also pushed Van Malen out of the national team. And Geus van der Meulen, also from Haarlem, but the other team, HFC, the traditional team from Haarlem, he was asked to come back in the national team. He already played in the 20s, so he was much older than all the other players. And the coach was Karel Lotzi, who was also from the club of Geus van der Meulen. So they knew each other very well. So everybody said, well, it's only friends asking each other. That's not fair. And he arrived later in Italy than the rest of the team. So there was already being a team building. And then after a couple of days, the keeper arrived, and he was the only one who was allowed to bring his wife to Italy. So all the other players, they were single. They had no wife in Italy, and only Geus van der Meulen was allowed to bring his wife. And after that tournament, Dutch journalists wrote that brought a lot of tension inside the Dutch team. Why is he allowed to have his wife? Why is he allowed to come later? Why is he treated like a king? And he is much more older than us. Why don't we have Adrie van Malen, who is a good keeper, but he was skipped after the match against Ireland? There were a lot of tensions. It's one of the reasons why, maybe that's the reason why the Netherlands only played one match. But I think the most important, there was absolutely no experience at all to be on a tournament like that. Especially in a tournament in Italy, which was used by Mussolini for making fascist propaganda. And so it was also a very political event. And I guess they never expected to be in a tournament like that, with massive attention of politics, of media. All of the world is coming together over there. And I think that crushed the Netherlands too. And maybe if Ireland would have won the match and was going to France, to Italy, the same would have been happened because they also didn't have any experience on a level like that. But it's again, we'll never know because it didn't happen.
Yeah. Well, listen, Jurryt, thank you very much for taking the time out to speak to us. It's much appreciated. We have some great history between the Netherlands and Ireland. On the balance, much more favourable towards the Netherlands than Ireland, but it's great to talk to you about this sort of stuff.
And thank you for also your information, because I didn't know there already were 2 players from Ireland for a week in the Netherlands before they were playing against the Netherlands. So you also taught me something, which I really appreciate.
Take each game on its merits there.